Hi, I'm Andrew Hammer, Executive Director at the Foundation for the Study of Political Psychopathology, and today I'm sitting down with our director, Dr. Richard Koenigsberg, to discuss his scholarly work on war, Hitler, the Holocaust, and what he calls the psychopathology of normalcy. Richard has adapted to the current trend of presenting his ideas through short videos. We have a series of these briefs, and today I will be reading and we will be discussing one of those called The Proof in the Pudding is in the Dying. The Proof in the Pudding is in the Dying by Richard Koenigsberg. The fundamental meaning of war is not killing, but compelling humans to die. The endless slaughter of the First World War lasted from July 28, 1914 through November 11th, 1918. Well before the end of the war, memorials were constructed to honor soldiers who had died. Could this have been the purpose of the war, which otherwise seemed chaotic and meaningless? To create memorials to honor dead soldiers? The construction of memorials continued throughout the war and for many years after the war, paying homage to those who had died. French soldiers died. British soldiers died. Russian soldiers died. German soldiers died. The reality of the nation state grew out of the deaths of these soldiers. The proof of the pudding was in the dying. Dying and killing demonstrates devotion to a sacred ideal which brings the ideal into being. The deaths of millions of soldiers during the First World War established the nation state as the fundamental political entity of Western civilization. But this mechanism of death as proof works similarly in other civilizations. Muslims bring Allah into existence through death. Those who die may be infidels or Muslims themselves. While the nature of the entity or ideal for which human beings die is fungible, the mechanism is the same. Death and memorialization perform a validation function. The proof of the pudding is in the dying.
Okay, thank you, Hammer. That's very good. What's your first reaction?
My first reaction to it is, well, as a soldier, I never went into war. As a former soldier, I never was going in with the idea that the idea was the dying. It was always the killing. Yeah, we thought we were badass mofos, so to speak, and that was the mindset that we had. So it is very, it forces me to really examine it when I look at it. It's like, okay, what if it wasn't, so I was there to help. I was there to show that the country was real.
And that you could kill in the name of the country. Yeah. So that's the most paradoxical nature of my work, and perhaps the most original in very simple terms, that I'm suggesting that wars are fought to bring about death. And death is a function of war because death is a way of proving your allegiance to the sacred ideal. So death is the way that people show their sincerity and their idealism, even though, at least in Western culture, it's very clear that they are not told that they're going there to die. They are told that they're going there to kill. And that is the great trick of Western warfare. Whereas in some cultures, like the Japanese culture, like the kamikaze pilots, the dying is part of the deal. And they kind of expect to die, and they're kind of accept the idea that they're going to die. Whereas our soldiers really have no idea that they're being sent to die, and they're trained to be bad mothers, as you say. The whole idea of basic training is to make you tough. You start off as an 18-year-old kid, most people who join the military, and they're little wimps like most 18-year-olds. And then they put them through this training, which seems so rough and rigorous, but I've read that anybody can do it. Almost nobody fails. Maybe one or two say, hey, I want to leave. So what was your experience of basic training?
It was strange. If you've ever seen that movie Full Metal Jacket, it it was like that in the in the yelling of the drill sergeants, but it was also like that. It was like being in something that wasn't real. There was because the drill sergeants would yell, but you could tell they weren't serious. I mean, like it was an act, and it became almost comical. And I mean, as recruits, we would have each like we would have like the greatest hit. Like everyone knew the greatest hits of all the drill sergeants. They all had their greatest hits. Like one used to call us boneheads. They'd be like, "Hey, bonehead, get over here!" And it was degrading, but you didn't see it like that because it was so absurd. And maybe
Okay, but
that's
in that movie, Full Metal Jacket,
yeah,
who that guy was a real drill sergeant in
hmm
actual life.
yeah,
You didn't get that feeling that it was humorous. You got the feeling that they were being
yeah,
intimidated and
yeah,
didn't like it at all. And it was kind of fright. If you're watching the
hmm
movie, it was very
yeah,
frightening. And then, of course, there was one guy that couldn't take it finally. And in one of the most shocking scenes in American movies, he shot the drill sergeant
hmm yeah,
and splattered himself against the mirror. So
hmm
I don't know that all people had your distance or
yeah.
skepticism. What do you think?
Uh, I think there's a lot of the timing too, because the military has. When I went through basic, there was a sort of joke that we weren't going through like the real basic that the soldiers went through like X years ago. And I kind of got the sense that that's always the line that the it's almost like but so there was a lot of stuff that wasn't as harsh as that, and I also wasn't in the Marines. The Marines are much more zealous, I guess would be the only way to explain it. It's I mean in that movie, I can't remember the scene, but he talks about that Marines, their purpose is for dying, and they don't have permission, like they don't have the permission, they're not allowed to die without permission.
I
And
see.
yeah, and that
And
was
what year was your basic training?
1993.
Okay, so that was after the era of American wars. The
Hmm
last real American war before 9/11 was 1975. So I've written a great deal about this, that there was a kind of retreat from the idealization of war.
hmm
And there was actually a
Yeah.
book written in 1992 by Francis Fukuyama. Do you remember that title? But the basic idea was that warfare was a past history. It was no longer the big, great thing that it had been up through World War II. That
hmm
people were, and Vietnam, that people no longer were interested. And then Bin Laden couldn't bear this, that we weren't going to be passionate about dying and killing.
hmm
And he produced that strange event 9/11, where he bombed, they trained the Muslim zealots to drive into the World Trade Center, and that brought back war. But still, there was only like 6,000 Americans killed
hmm
in the war against Afghanistan. Now, why they started fighting against Afghanistan, that's another story. But still, there were 200,000 people that George Bush killed. And right now, he's just roaming around like a normal person. He obviously is one of the first presidents where you can see he feels guilt about it, and is trying to making reparations. He's turned into I wouldn't say a peacenik, but he obviously goes to hospitals to see wounded soldiers, and he feels guilt. So guilt about soldiers who are wounded is kind of a new thing, because this is their job, right? To die for the country. And that's the essence of my work, is that the soldier is not fundamentally a killer, but he has a basic job to die for the country. And that's the way one proves that the country is real, that so many people die for it.
That makes sense. So
Okay.
the proof of the pudding really is in all the soldiers dying.
Yeah.
That proves the
Okay.
country's
So
real.
So I think that's enough for now. We're going to try to limit these short videos to maybe 7 to 9 minutes, but there'll be a whole series of them. So hopefully there'll be a continuity that people will feel in grasping the fundamental ideas that I'm presenting, which are paradoxical, are not the norm, though I don't like to use the word, quote, radical, because that has a different meaning in our culture. And I've never considered myself a radical in the sense of whatever that's supposed to mean. Okay, so
Well, thank you. Yes, thank you for the discussion, Richard. Everyone have a
okay,
nice day, and
okay.
we will see you later.
Thank you, Hammer.